I think that's one of the things that's hardest about being a writer, is getting to this point where you can't just enjoy books for what they are. Like every story becomes this process of like wondering like, how can I do that? How can I do that? Or how can I do that better? Sometimes that's fun, but sometimes it's really, really frustrating. Today I've just been like writing a lot. I feel like I'm at a really interesting point in my current project. I've been revising this book for a while now, and I'm almost done revising part 2. And revising part 2 was like, surprisingly, I felt like it was pretty smooth sailing. I'm feeling a little weird about like how to balance vlogging with writing, because I feel like whenever I'm not vlogging, I tend to get a lot of writing done. But whenever I get stuck, I like feel this weird urge to like pick up a camera and just talk, and it's just so odd. I don't know, it's just suddenly when you've gotten used to vlogging, yeah, I just feel this urge to like always reach for a camera, and sometimes it does help me get through whatever I'm stuck on, but also I just feel like sometimes it's just weird that that is now my habit. But anyways, I've just been doing a lot of writing in the few weeks that I haven't been vlogging. I'm basically at the end-ish of revising Act 2, which is slightly shorter than Act 1, but I feel like I didn't hit as many roadblocks revising Act 2 than I did when I was revising Act 1. Okay, I just need to jump in really quickly and correct something, because I keep saying Act 2, Act 1, etc. It is more accurate for me to say Part 1 and Part 2, because there are multiple parts, and those parts don't necessarily align 100% with acts in the book. Because I think when we think of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 in a story, we think a 3 or a 4-act story structure, but the way that the book is structured is that it has 5 or 6 parts. So Part 2 / Part 3 is kind of Act 2 if you think about it in the 3 to 4 act story structure. So I just want to make that distinction because I feel like if I'm saying Act 2, you guys might think that I'm further along in the revision than I am. For some reason, I fully expected Act 2 to just be so much harder than it was. And maybe it comes down to just like realizing that I have a little bit more faith in the story after, you know, doubting it for a while. I'm kind of rewriting one of my favorite chapters in the book, which is crazy to say because like genuinely one of the chapters that is in Act 2 is like one of my favorite chapters like ever. Didn't expect to find that many flaws in that chapter. Yeah, it was just super weird because it was like the chapters that I thought would need a lot of work, I ended up not changing as much, and then my favorite chapter in the act, which I thought didn't need any work, ended up needing essentially a rewrite. I've literally been revising the chapter now for probably almost like 3 whole days. I'm trying not to like get caught up in building scenes just around a single line just because I want to keep it that bad. But yeah, my goal over the next few days is to basically finish the revision of this chapter, which is the second last chapter of Act 2, and then I have one more chapter that needs revision, and then we will be in Act 3, which is going to be an actual like beast to edit. On a somewhat unrelated note though, posted that line editing video, the one where I went through a chapter of Project Moon and I showed you guys a couple excerpts with 2 characters named Mito and Aston, and I was genuinely like so nervous to post that video. Like I just thought that, I don't know, I just didn't know how helpful it would be, because like while I was editing it, I was like, I don't know if I'm making any sense. But I ended up like posting it anyway. I'm honestly like overwhelmed how many people actually enjoyed that video, and I know quite a few of you came because like Rachel gave me a shout out on her community tab, which was crazy. But yeah, if you watched that video, if you liked it and commented on it and everything, thank you so much, because I genuinely was extremely overwhelmed. Because sometimes I feel like when I'm doing those kinds of videos, I don't know how well I'm like explaining myself, you know? Okay, So it is currently 8 p.m. I just finished reviewing beta reader feedback for the first act of this book. If you watched my last vlog, you would know that I decided to send the first 18,000 words to my friend Emily to read, and she finished reading the first 8 chapters. So I finished reading everything that she, like all the comments that she left, filmed my reaction to all her comments already. The biggest takeaways from like a constructive feedback perspective was that she had a lot more instances where it was kind of surprising to hear her thoughts on the pacing, because I thought that she would have comments kind of pointing out where the pacing was too slow, but she actually had way more comments about moments where the pacing could be slowed down. And from a character perspective, she didn't have too many negative things to say. Anyways, yeah, I go through all of the feedback in that other video, so I won't go through all of it now. It's hard to see not just what the flaws in the story are, but it's hard to see like what the good parts of the story are sometimes when you get caught up in your own head. The other thing I was thinking about the other day was maybe bringing a prologue back into the book. The first draft had a prologue, and then when I started writing the second draft, I cut it out because I didn't think I needed it anymore. But now I'm thinking that maybe I still should have a prologue, but just kind of change it, like basically completely rewrite it. Like I wouldn't repurpose the old prologue. The thing is, I personally really enjoy prologues. Like I actually really enjoy a prologue, but like there's all this discourse that's been going around about whether or not a prologue is actually a good thing, because I feel like a prologue is almost like it's like your first window into the tone and the feel of the story. I've already written a draft of this book, so I feel like I have a good sense of what the tone is of the story. I still feel like I don't want to write any prologue until I finish this draft. I also made significant progress on the chapter that I've been writing for literally 3 or 4 days now. This chapter is in the perspective of Nico, who is one of the side characters, one of Anna's friends. Yeah, this chapter legitimately used to be one of my favorites in the entire book, and now I don't I'm feeling super weird about it. I don't know, like I'm basically done revising it. It's more or less done. I think the good news is essentially almost completely rewrote it, but I was able to keep the word count the same. I didn't really add or subtract any significant amount of words, which is good. But also, I think the reason that I'm feeling very apprehensive about it at the moment is because I used to have a lot of lines in this chapter that I genuinely really liked, and I had to cut them because as the purpose of the scene began to shift, I realized that I couldn't keep those lines. That was a very difficult conversation that I had to have with myself. Okay, so yesterday was a crazy long day. When I was like talking to some of my old classmates, a few of them were actually like, they're like, you're writing a book, right? Like you write books? I never really got to dedicate so much of myself to my writing when I was in university. It was always something that I just did sort of just for myself. And then now that I talk about it more on this channel, now that I post about it, it was just like odd to like have people ask me about it like in person. Today I am going to be starting to edit the last chapter of Act 2. Yeah, this is a chapter that is in Anna's perspective. I rewrote the chapter right before it, and then because I changed a lot of stuff in that chapter, I now have to change things accordingly in the next chapter, so it's a whole thing, but that's going to be my focus for today. Yeah, but this chapter that I have to work on is 2,000 words, which is not, it's not short, but it's not too long. There are chapters that are almost like double that length, so I think it'll be manageable. Okay, so last night I was actually able to finish editing the last chapter of part 2. I wrote the last like part of it at like 2 a.m. So I'm just gonna comb through it and try to edit it as much as possible, and then I am gonna go back to the start of the act because the first chapter of the act isn't fully written out yet. It's there, like the skeleton of it is there, but the last like half of it isn't fully written. I kind of forgot that I left it, but then when I was looking back at the draft yesterday, I remembered that I hadn't actually finished it. Part 3 is definitely the hardest part of the book. I actually remember when I was writing the first draft, when I reached this part of the manuscript, that is when I hit like my lowest of lows with this book. Like that was the first time I had, in this project, when I had been writing it, that I wanted to like quit, because that's how much I like hated drafting that part of the book. Not because it's not a fun part of the book, but I think it's more because when I was going through the first act, I wasn't happy how it had turned out. Like I don't think that the events of that act or that part are the most optimal, and I'm just scared that when I get to that part of the book again, I'm gonna want to give up on it again. Okay, so I actually had a surprisingly productive day yesterday. So I was able to make some really good progress on the first chapter of part 2. Low-key is like one of my least favorite chapters in the entire book. It's a flashback chapter, and I just think that it's like where it's at right now, to be honest, I'm not like super happy with it. And for a while yesterday, I was like it was just like one of those writing days where it was so bad. Like I felt like the chapter was so bad that I didn't want to keep writing it. Like I wanted to skip it. But I just kind of like powered through it. I forced myself to keep writing it, and I think it has potential. Not every writing day is gonna be great, you know? I think the other reason that I was feeling particularly awful about it was because I think the other chapters in part 2 are pretty strong. For me, it's just like I'm not as like happy with it, but I was able to make it through like 80 to 90% of it. So I just have like one more section that I need to rewrite. Like I know what I want the scene to accomplish, I just can't find the right scene like the right events to get those points across, you know? I didn't get like any writing done today. I thought I would. It did not happen, and it's 6 o'clock. It's probably gonna be another late night writing session. I'm very determined to make progress on this part tonight. I was watching one of Rachel's videos today. One of the things that she was talking about was what to sort of do when you feel like your writing isn't good enough and it's sort of stopping you from working on your manuscript. One of the things she said was like acknowledging that the writing is not where you want it to be and kind of just moving on, which I feel like is one of the most healthy ways to look at your writing. And I think it's one of those things that you kind of just have to develop as you grow in your writing journey or your writing career, acknowledging the fact that writing in and of itself is a very imperfect process. I think this goes back to something that I've talked about a lot already on the channel, but it's learning how to not compare your first draft writing with someone else's published writing. Sometimes it's really hard for me to read published books because I just get so frustrated with the fact that my manuscript isn't nearly that polished. It's getting to the point where sometimes it's like genuinely hard for me to enjoy books, which is crazy. I think that's one of the things that's hardest about being a writer, is getting to this point where you can't just enjoy books for what they are. Like every story becomes this process of like wondering like, how can I do that? how can I do that? Or how can I do that better? Sometimes that's fun, but sometimes it's really, really frustrating. When I was watching Rachel's video, I feel like I just felt better about where my draft was at, genuinely. Because I had kind of like woken up this morning and been unsettled by the writing in this chapter. Like, the writing is so not good in this chapter. I think there's just something about being reassured by other writers that it's okay for your writing to be bad. I think what I've sort of been learning from this editing process recently is that I feel a lot better about my writing when I can acknowledge that editing can make any scene better. Like, it doesn't matter how bad your draft currently is. With enough editing, any scene can be good. And I think I just have to whittle it down. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I've just been writing for the last like 30-ish minutes, and I'm honestly, it's like past 5 p.m. and I'm about to crash. I really tried to like limit my caffeine intake today because I have to wake up early for the next 3 days, and I'm super dreading it. I have a whole vlog about how I hate waking up early. Yeah, I kind of like cut myself off from caffeine after like 1 p.m.-ish. Anyways, I have made some progress on the chapter that's been giving me so much strife. I'm kind of just at a point where I'm like tweaking the details. So we're like almost there. I feel like I can finish like a draft of it by the end of today. Yeah, I'm still not feeling like super great about it, but I feel like it is in a better place than it was in the first draft. I think what makes this chapter so difficult is that it's supposed to be a foreshadowing chapter on both an internal and external level. The more intangible things like character arcs and themes have to be foreshadowed in this chapter, as well as the literal plot. It just hasn't been easy trying to balance those things. There's like a key side character that is introduced in this chapter, and I have to do a lot to like characterize them, as well as establish what their relationship is with Anna. So it's just a lot, and I don't know, I just, for some reason, I feel like maybe I just don't have a very deft hand because I can't make it work. I can't make it sound good. Also, I don't know if I like mentioned this already, but a while ago I went to the bookstore and I picked up 3 new books. This one is The Liar's Dictionary. This just has like one of the coolest premises I have heard in a really, really long time. I picked it up because there was a new book idea that I was brainstorming that would essentially be a dual timeline mystery. And when I read the premise for this, I was like, say less, I need to read this. I also ended up buying the Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I was originally reading a library copy, but then I just couldn't read it fast enough. But I really wanted to finish reading it. And the last book that I picked up is A Hero of Our Time by Nabin Ruthnam. I picked this one up because the opening line was legitimately one of the best opening lines I have ever read. Certain stories are for wielding, not telling. I used to have one before it was taken away. Literally, shut up. You know what's interesting about writing, especially when you're writing a scene or a chapter, it starts out and it's really bad and you can feel in your gut that it's bad, and you spend hours, days, weeks, months, years revising it, and there's always this turning point that happens where the scene goes from being bad to being better to then being good. And by good, I mean, you know, when you're like reading back your own writing over and over and over again, suddenly you're reading it, it occurs to you that maybe you're actually starting to enjoy it. I hesitate to say it's good because I don't know if it's good. Like, there's something about it that it might be a little bit too heavy-handed for my taste, but compared to where this chapter was months ago in draft 1, finally feels like a scene. This finally feels like a true chapter that can sit in this manuscript. Before, it felt like a black stain on the entire book. At least we've like carved off that dirty first draft veneer that was on it, and I'm just feeling so much better right now. Today's Friday, and today and yesterday I had to go into the office, but I just wanted to wrap it up here. I made some surprisingly good progress for this week. I was actually able to get in a full rough rewrite of part 2, which was basically my goal for this week. Obviously, I still have to do quite a few line edits for it because it's still pretty rough. You know, I was able to like rewrite most of it, but I'm so tired. Like, over the past 2 days of like commuting to go into the office, I realized how much my like energy levels have changed over the past 2 years. Yesterday, I was also able to meet up with Emily after work, and if you guys saw my last video where I blind reacted to her beta reader feedback, after I filmed that video, I actually was able to meet up with her quickly to just like ask her questions about the comments that she left. So we had like a good working session. Emily is here to help me.
I'm here to be interviewed.
Literally, so she left all of these amazing comments on my draft, and now it's just follow-up time.
And Chris wants me to account for them.
Yeah, to answer for your crimes.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Now I have a lot of clarity on some of her more like vague comments, so it was really helpful to have that like face-to-face with her. Really encouraging to just like have her read the book and for her to be so like passionate about the story. Like, it was genuinely really surprising. Anyways, that is the writing update. Thank you guys as always for watching this video. I will see you guys in the next one.